What is up, guys? Welcome back to another UFC prediction video. This week, we got another fight night in the Apex, headlined by none other than Fluffy Hernandez and Roman Dolidze. Without any further ado, we're going to go ahead and get right into the full card predictions. First fight on the card, we have Cody Brundage versus Eric McConico. Eric McConico, he's only fought once in the UFC. You know, pretty shallow regional record as well. Got knocked out against Nursultan Rudziboyev in his UFC debut pretty quickly in the first round. Not a lot of adversity for Nursultan there. So you don't have a lot to go off of in terms of Eric McConico. And Cody Brundage, he has a knack for a no contest stoppage. He did get a very good TKO over Julian Marquez. Didn't have a horrible performance against Mansur Abdul Malik, but nonetheless, he just really isn't anything to write home about. But he does have okay grappling and decent hands. I think he can manage to get a shitty decision over Eric McConico. So yeah, I'll go with Cody Brundage, 29-28, sloppy decision. Next fight on the card, Ode Osborne versus Gilbert Urbina. Ode Osborne is going to win this via first round TKO. He's a great striker. You look at his TKO wins over Tim Means, that was a nasty, nasty finish. And, technical fighter, good boxing, good counter strikes. He did get drowned by Mcdebek Orobai in his fight before that. And, in his recent fight against Pinelli Soriano at 170, you can kind of just say he got clipped. That fight ended very, very quickly. The Summersberger TKO, Morales TKO, not great names, but you can tell that he does have good technical ability. Former lightweight, he's going to be faster. So yeah, give me Ode Osborne to knock out Gilbert Urbina in the first round. Getting knocked out by Charles Radke very quickly, lost to Brian Battle, by finish very quickly. So the UFC resume isn't very good, and he beat, Kosuke. You don't even know who that is. So yeah, give me Uros Medic to win via first round TKO. Gilbert Urbina's grappling is not good enough to give Medic problems, and Medic's leagues above on the feet, way faster, way cleaner. He's going to win by first round knockout with a crispy check hook. All right, next fight on the card, Elijah Smith versus Kazama. Kazama, the only thing I can really remember this dude doing is getting knocked out by Rinya Nakamura, which really isn't a good look. Rinya doesn't have great hands. He did beat Grigoriou by submission last time out, and he did lose to Garrett Armfield by TKO. Look, I'm going to pick Elijah Smith to win a decision here. Didn't really impress me with his Dana White Contender Series performance against Aaron Tao, where, he kind of out-technicaled him to a decision, but kind of gassed out, kind of got broken a little bit in the third round against a fighter who just really isn't talented whatsoever in Aaron Tao. But you can kind of boil that up to maybe Dana White Contender Series jitters. He was only 21 years old at the time, very young fighter. So, he's going to improve on a fight-to-fight basis. His dad is like an MMA coach, former Ultimate Fighter, so he has a lot of experience. He's been in the game a long time. The kid does have really good boxing, good striking overall. He's well-rounded. He has offensive wrestling as well. He'll be able to cruise to a 30-27 decision here, just being better everywhere and younger, faster, more momentum on his side. Kazama's been out for a decent amount of time as well. Elijah Smith did almost get subbed on a couple of occasions versus Vince Morales, but other than that, was pretty much handling that fight. Elijah Smith should cruise to a 30-27 here. So yeah, I'll pick him by unanimous decision. Next fight on the card, Julius Walker versus Rafael Cerqueria. Look, Cerqueria, padded record, lost by first round TKO against Aslan, lost by first round TKO against Modestas Bukauskas. Look, he has a decent little pull counter, but that's really all he has in his entire game. He has only ever beaten cans, and look, Julius Walker, Marauder, super tall, had a good scrap against Alonzo Minifield on that Seattle card. Close fight for as long as it lasted, and that was on short notice against a crafty vet who does hit very hard in Minifield. Julius Walker, very good knees in the clinch like a Rainer de Ritter. Kind of sloppy, but still they get home, they land. And, he's really tall. He's going to have a length advantage. Decent Muay Thai skills on display as well. I think he's going to be able to handle Rafael Cerqueria here. So yeah, give me Julius Walker. I'll take him to win via second round TKO here. Next fight on the card, Christian Leroy Duncan versus Eric Hernandez. Look, Eric Anders, he beat the skeleton of Chris Weidman last time out. And, he's a decent, well-rounded fighter. We remember him getting absolutely tuned up versus Khalil Roundtree. And, he's a win one, lose one guy. He'll lose to Marc-Andre Barriault. He'll beat Jamie Pickett. He's one of these types of guys. Not really stand out anywhere. Decent offensive wrestling, but on the feet, very, very basic. I think that Christian Leroy Duncan has decent enough takedown defense when he's not fighting a guy that is super physical and quite talented like a RoboCop. I think CLD, his kickboxing skills are solid. You saw him beat Pulayev, not a horrible win there. You saw him beat Claudio Ribeiro, pretty much styled on him. Got a good TKO. And, his only losses are to Petrosian, where he just had no fight IQ very early in his career in his UFC second fight. And then, to RoboCop. He's beating this level of competition. Tradovic, a Dennis Tululin, a Claudio Ribeiro. He beats this type of fighter. I think he gets a decision here against Eric Anders. I'll pick him to win a 30-27 decision in this one. Just using his striking, he's way slicker on the feet. His takedown defense is all right. In the clinch, he doesn't do a ton of damage, but he doesn't lose position that bad. He will reverse, get to an advantageous position against the cage. He's solid. Much younger, fresher fighter here. Eric Anders sneaking up on 40 years of age. Christian Leroy Duncan should be able to outstrike him to a 30-27 in a similar fashion to how Khalil Roundtree did back in the day. Our next fight on the card, John Matsumoto versus Miles Johns. Miles Johns is a explosive, kind of wrestle boxer type of fighter. He's been floating around the bantamweight division, trying to make a run for the rankings. He's never impressed me too much. He has some raw athletic ability, decent hands, but really not able to put it all together. Doesn't fight super intelligently, doesn't have a lot of slickness to his game. And you saw that in his last fight versus Felipe Lima, who's a great fighter, but Felipe Lima, was touching him up with a speed advantage, utilizing the grappling quite well, and beat him pretty handily there by decision. And, he's pretty low output, Miles Johns, that is. And Douglas Silva de Andrade, they had a really slow fight where Miles Johns kind of scraped it out. You look back at his TKO loss to Mauri Bautista, losing to John Castaneda. Those aren't good losses. And beating guys like Dan Argueta, Cody Gibson, crafty veterans that are well-rounded. He has a decent skill set, but he's fighting a guy in John Matsumoto here who is definitely standout in terms of the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. His back takes, his transitions on the ground, very, very good. You saw that in his fight versus Rob Font, where he did lose that one by split decision. A lot of people, had John Matsumoto winning that fight. A lot of people, picked him outright, and they were kind of disappointed in the decision. I think you can go either way on that fight, realistically. Rob Font did have a very unsportsmanlike start to that fight, though. He instantly punched Matsumoto off of the glove touch. He sniped him with a 1-2, fake touch glove, sniped him with the 1-2, and that put Matsumoto on the back foot from the start. Matsumoto, he has good technical kickboxing. He can put a nice 1-2-3 high kick together, good combinations, and he's slick. He can time takedowns well. Miles Johns, I think he's going to have a physicality advantage here. He is going to hit harder. I think he is going to have respect on the feet, where Matsumoto is going to have to lean on the grappling. And this could be a spot where, the veteran is kind of able to put pressure on the young fighter, Matsumoto that is, who can't get a ton of respect on the feet. He can land his volume, not a ton of damage though. If the grappling gets denied, he could run into issues, but I'm going to pick Matsumoto to win a split decision here, 29-28. He's going to be on the right side of the split this time because Miles Johns, he's not going to have the volume that a Rob Font does or the accuracy. He hits hard. He might have moments on the feet where he stuffs a takedown, maybe lands a few clean shots upstairs with the hands, but he's not very good at winning rounds overall. Not a ton of output, kind of one-dimensional on the feet. And, he can shoot his own takedowns, but no submission threat whatsoever. Matsumoto, I think, comes into this fight, just has a more well-rounded skill set. He's going to be more technical, and I think he's going to win just narrowly on volume and control time. It's going to be a similar fight to the Rob Font fight where Matsumoto does end up getting his hand raised. So, yeah, give me Matsumoto 29-28 split. Next fight on the card, Ceerod versus Andre Fili. Both of these guys lost to Mel Costa last time out. Andre Fili getting finished up with a guillotine, and Christian Rodriguez going to a very, very close, I believe it was a split decision. If it wasn't split decision, it was like 29-28. But look, I think that you could actually give the Mel Costa fight to Ceerod. I think he did the better work in terms of the damage in that fight, landing some ground and pound when he would, hit the foot sweeps. His foot sweeps were incredible in that fight. He hit like 10 of them on Mel Costa. I think he can get takedowns and have advantageous moments against Andre Fili with the grappling. I think he's going to have plus grappling here. Andre Fili is not going to be a submission threat like a Julian Erosa, where we have seen, Ceerod get wrapped up in submissions in the past, but I think that he's still improving on a fight-to-fight basis, only 28 years old now. I love the win against Austin Bashi, where Austin Bashi making his UFC debut. We've seen that Austin Bashi is a very high-level submission artist, and Ceerod was able to handle that, stuffed a lot of the takedowns, stayed very composed even with Austin Bashi on his back, trying to seek in a rear naked choke. He defended the position well, and on the feet, he looked phenomenal in that fight. Boxing looked on point, was landing like really good combinations against Bashi. We know that the cardio is, definitely on the plus side for Christian Rodriguez. Even being the younger fighter here, I think that even though he's going to be shorter and less, at a reach disadvantage, I think that he's definitely going to impose his will with the strength in the clinch, with the grappling. He's going to hit stuff like foot sweeps to get Andre Fili to the ground. Fili, he's not going to have an offensive submission threat like a Mel Costa, like a Bashi, like an Erosa that Ceerod has to worry about. So I definitely think he's going to have more ability to use his grappling. I mean, you even look back at the Isaac Dolgarian fight. Dolgarian is, a standout in terms of his wrestling grappling ability. So Ceerod wasn't able to use it offensively there like he was in the Raul Rosas Jr., Cameron Simon fights. I still like those wins for Ceerod looking back on him. Cameron Simon, kind of a similar fighter to Andre Fili, wiry striker, put some decent combinations together, straight shots. Andre Fili, that's where he's good, with his, straight right hand down the middle. Did he fight Cub Swanson? I didn't even like the performance against Cub Swanson, realistically. There was a split decision. A lot of people gave that to Cub, stained by Dan Ige. You look at the Lucas Almeida win, that's a good TKO, but Lucas Almeida, older fighter, not really at a high level. When you look back at Andre Fili's career, you're seeing a lot of inconsistency. He's been around a long time. He really has been around a long, long time. Made his UFC debut in 2013. We still kind of think of Andre Fili as a younger fighter, but nonetheless, we see him losing decisions quite often. When he gets his hand raised, most of the time it is, by finish, or even when he does win a decision, it's not very dominant. Christian Rodriguez, prospect killer. I think that, this is going to be one of the old heads that he's actually able to beat. So yeah, give me Ceerod, better boxing, way better conditioning, stamina. He's going to have a grappling plus side in this one. Unless Fili just snipes him with something clean from a range that Ceerod just isn't comfortable closing, Ceerod should be able to handle this fight. So yeah, I'll actually take Ceerod to win a 30-27 decision here. I could definitely see a late round submission from Ceerod though, but I'll pick him to win unanimous decision here. All right, next fight on the card, short notice. Steve Erceg taking on Ode Osborne. Steve Erceg was supposed to fight Park this week, and then Park had to, of course, fight Tetsudo Taira last week. Ode Osborne really looked good in his last fight versus Luis Gurule, and Luis Gurule hasn't came around in the UFC yet, but he is a good fighter, and I like that won by knockout. And Ode Osborne, he, is kind of reminds me of a flyweight Andre Fili. He'll lose 3 times in a row to Luis Rodriguez, Jafiel Fialho, and Asu Amabayev, and then, he's getting wins against Charles Johnson, Luis Gurule. So very, very inconsistent fighter for sure. We have seen him finished up. Tyson Nam got a nasty, nasty finish over him. Manel Kape, of course, with the flying knee. But I don't think Steve Erceg's going to knock him out here. Steve Erceg, unless he's fighting Matt Schnell, really isn't hurting people too bad. I think actually realistically on the feet, this is a lot closer than people expect, and especially in terms of the odds. Steve Erceg minus 600 favorite here. Ode Osborne is definitely underrated on the feet in this spot. We saw him land a nasty TKO in his last fight. Erceg, we've seen him, get tagged and put away by a Kai Kara France, but Kai Kara France definitely hits harder, higher level fighter than an Ode Osborne. And where I see Erceg having a big advantage in this fight is actually going to be in the grappling. He does have really good grappling, good submission game. We saw that on the regional scene. I believe it was either in Eternal or Hex MMA over there in Australia. But, look, close fight with the champ, Pantoja. Damn near a split decision there. Very, very close fight. Came down to a round. He got caught versus Kai Kara-France. I think he wins that fight if we see it extend. And realistically, I did not hate the performance last time out against Brandon Moreno. If you want to have a nuanced look at that fight, I think it's 3-2, and you can really make an argument for Erceg doing a lot better than the scorecards and how people, kind of look back at that fight. I think we kind of misjudge it because he was doing very good, using his length well. The kicks were on point versus a boxer in Brandon Moreno, and I liked the performance there. If he would have fought the way he did against Moreno, against Kai Kara-France, he would have cruised to a decision. Steve Erceg's a very talented fighter, prodigy on the feet, realistically, very, very technical, good counters. I think Steve Erceg's going to be able to win this one via submission, actually. I think he's going to be able to, he does have a knack for getting hit with an overhand there. The Kai Kara-France fight, the Alessandro Costa fight back in the day, got touched with a lot of overhands. Ode Osborne could knock him out, but I'm going to pick Steve Erceg to, win the first 2 rounds on the feet, mixing in a little bit of clinch work, and then in the 3rd round, I think he'll put it on Ode Osborne. Ode Osborne taking it on short notice. I think he'll get a little bit tired. Steve Erceg, he's then going to use his grappling. I think he ends up finding a submission. I'll pick Steve Erceg to win this one via a rear naked choke submission in the 3rd round. So yeah, give me Steve Erceg to get his first sub in the UFC here. All right, we move on to the main event of the evening. We got Fluffy Hernandez and Roman Dolidze. Look, I cannot stand Roman Dolidze. I'll never give him credit. He reminds me of RDR. Not a talented fighter. The record, 16-3. I do not understand how he has this record. He's not talented anywhere, and he's slow. He's uncoordinated, but he somehow just, pulls these wins off, out of nowhere. This dude has lost to Trevin fucking Giles. This dude literally lost a decision to Trevin Giles. So how good really is Roman Dolidze? And he's in a fucking top contenders fight in the big 2025. But look, lost to Trevin Giles. All of his wins past that, Kyle Dawkins, Phil Hawes, terrible wins. Just absolutely fluked Hermanson. The only reason that we really look at Dolidze as a threat on the ground, he's got good submissions. The only reason we even think about that is because of that win over Jack Hermanson. Dolidze does not have a UFC submission on his resume. He lost a decision to Marvin Vettori, lost a decision handily to Amavov, got schooled in that fight. And look, ever since then, he has won 3 times in a row. But I just don't think whatsoever that these 3 wins are impressive. Anthony Smith, an absolute shell of Anthony Smith, who just completely gave up in that fight. And Dolidze wasn't even super dominant there. He didn't get a finish, didn't have excellent grappling positions, just kind of had Anthony Smith in the turtled up position against the cage and didn't do shit with it other than that. Fluke against Kevin Holland, Kevin Holland, rib injury as soon as the fight started. And he had a very sloppy dog shit fight with Marvin Vettori where he did get dropped in the 2nd round. And he just kind of outworked him. He lands big overhands, he lands big body kicks, and he imposes his will and move forward, but he has no boxing, he has no head movement. His kicks are big and powerful, but he's not clean. He has no setups. He hasn't landed a submission in the UFC, so I think his ground game is just disgustingly overrated simply because of the Jack Hermanson fight. He gets tired as fights go on. I think Roman Dolidze is one of the most overrated fighters in the entire UFC. It makes me sick to my stomach that this dude is ranked. RDR is a much better fighter than Roman Dolidze, and I think RDR is terrible. But yeah, I think that Roman Dolidze is an embarrassment to the sport. I think he's not technical. He's like, Dricus, RDR, these guys that are sloppy and kind of unorthodox, I can still kind of get behind them. I don't like RDR, but I do like Dricus. I see how their style works for them because of the way that they fight, and they do have, submission abilities. They do have decent striking on the feet, RDR with the knees. Dricus has excellent kicks. Roman Dolidze is not like that. He's just completely a sloppy, boppy brute in the cage. And I wish Mavov would have fucking finished him up and knocked him out, because he also seems like a very undesirable character in terms of his personality. So I don't want him to have success. Look, Fluffy's going to school him. In terms of tape study for this fight, I like to look back at the Rodolfo Vieira fight. I like to look back at the Brendan Allen fight for Fluffy Hernandez here against two well-rounded grapplers with decent striking who could kind of match him on the ground in terms of their technicalities. He was able to handle both of those. A submission win against Rodolfo Vieira, that's very, very impressive. Even a submission win over Jung Young Park. I damn near forgot about the win over the Iron Turtle. That's a very similar matchup to a Roman Dolidze. And, Fluffy had success there. He was able to get a submission, over Rodolfo Vieira. Those are two guys with good pressure, orthodox fighters. Neither of them are southpaw. Both of those guys are orthodox. They got good grappling, good submissions, and they're a very similar fighter to a Roman Dolidze. You saw Anthony Hernandez handle those fights. He had a closely fought decision win against Brendan Allen, unanimous. I had money on Fluffy in that spot. Had money on him against Michel Pereira as well. But, he's done right for me in both of those fights. The Brendan Allen fight was very, very close. Brendan Allen had some success with some roundhouse kicks to the head, which slightly concerning. Dolidze has okay kicks. He could look to implement that. But at the end of the day, even when Brendan Allen had some good technical moments on the feet, he would hit some reversals on the ground. I believe he took Fluffy's back at one point. Fluffy is just always going to get the better of any type of fight that gets scrappy or has any type of grappling, prolonged exchanges in the fight. This is a 5-round fight at middleweight, especially at the Apex. If you look at it statistically, middleweight fights in the Apex, especially main events, almost always go the distance. Very rarely will you see a middleweight fight in the Apex end inside the distance, unless it's like a Jared Cannonier, RoboCop type of fight with two marauders. When you're seeing, a Mavov Dolidze, a Dolidze Vittori, a lot of these fights are going 5 rounds. Even Michel Pereira versus Anthony Fluffy Hernandez, 2 middleweights in the Apex, even though we got the 5th round stoppage, if Michel Pereira didn't completely break, that fight would have gone to the cards. I think that this fight does go to the final bell. Roman Dolidze, though, is going to gas out, and there's going to be plenty of grappling exchanges where Fluffy's going to get the better of him. Fluffy's dog tough. He's taking nasty, nasty body shots from Michel Pereira, nasty, nasty body kicks from Roman Kopylov. He's dog tough. He's not going to quit to a body shot like he did against Kevin Holland. Can't believe he lost to the bum Kevin Holland back in the day, but nonetheless, that's the type of fighter Kevin Holland is. Look, Dolidze does not have good body strikes. He has a decent roundhouse kick to the body, but he does not have any boxing. He's not going to slip a nice liver shot. He's not going to dig a straight shot to the solar plexus. He's not going to hit Fluffy with any type of good strike to the body. He might body kick him a few times, but if Fluffy's eating body kicks from Kopylov, he can eat some body kicks from slowpoke, sloppy man Dolidze. I think Dolidze, he's going to have an explosive first round. He's going to try to pressure forward, but Fluffy, he's going to be younger, faster, a little bit slicker on the feet. I don't love Fluffy's stand-up, but, he gets it done. He's kind of like Merab. I think that Fluffy is actually going to get backed up a little bit in the first, but then he's going to land the cleaner strikes. Dolidze's going to start to slow. The volume's going to slow. And then from the second round on, Fluffy's going to do his thing. Middleweight Merab, he's going to put some hands on him. Starting out, he's going to tire him out, making Dolidze react, and then he's going to start, getting to the hips, getting his takedowns. Dolidze's probably going to get up a few times because he does have decent grappling. That's exactly what Fluffy wants him to do. As soon as he gets up, Fluffy's shooting again. And, if Fluffy doesn't get the second takedown, he's going to get the third. If he doesn't get the third, he's going to get the fourth. You can rely on Fluffy to go in there, shoot tons and tons of takedowns. He's never going to get tired. Dog tough. He's got excellent submissions against high-level grapplers. I'm changing my pick. Fluffy's going to finish this fucking bum. Fluffy is going to win via a 4th round submission. Fluffy's going to get a head and arm triangle choke in this one. He's going to flatten him out. He's going to get him tired. And yeah, he's going to sink in that choke and finish him up in the 4th after just putting a middleweight Merab type of pace on him. I love the grappling. I like the youth advantage. He's going to be faster. Still improving on a fight-to-fight basis. He's had very similar stylistic matchups in the past, whereas Roman Dolidze, he's never really fought a pressure grappler. I mean, most of the times he's fighting, you know, well-rounded guys like a Nasruddin Imavov, a Marvin Vettori, kind of just overall MMA generalist. He's never fought a guy that's going to try to drown him with the wrestling. Fluffy's going to, you know, he's going to have Dolidze in for a rude awakening. Dolidze is literally going to walk across a stage and collect a diploma after this fight because Hernandez is going to school him so bad. Dolidze is going to walk across the stage, collect a diploma because Anthony Hernandez is going to be the professor in this fight and absolutely school him. So yeah, give me Fluffy, 4th round sub. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Have a great rest of your day. Enjoy the card this weekend. We got a 1 unit bet only on this card. I don't like the card at all from a betting perspective. I got Ceerod and Anthony Fluffy Hernandez wrapped in there together. -108. We'll see what happens, but I'll leave you guys with that. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Like, comment, subscribe. That, you know, helps me out a lot. I appreciate it, and have a great rest of your day.